Pledge of Allegiance. So Stephen, if you can put the flag up. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Barney, it'll just be 1 second, sorry.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the establishment of the regular agenda. Are there any changes to the regular agenda?
There are none.
Okay. With that, so this evening is a special school board meeting that we talked about at our last board meeting. We would call for an update to the public regarding the opening of schools. We also added our capital projects update that we were not able to do on our last board meeting. So one of the things we wanted to do is we'll have the administration give an update for us as far as in-person hybrid learning and that availability for our families and students. And then we will take no more than 30 minutes of public input. We've heard a lot of information from the public. We've received many emails, and we will split that up between 15 minutes for those who may have feelings that do not align with the district's feedback, and those that then are supportive of some of the feedback that we've gotten. So I'll figure that out once. I'll talk more about that when we get to the public input part, and then after that we'll move into board discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Thiele.
Thank you, President Moraldo. So the way we're going to tackle this here tonight is I'm going to first talk about some of the things that we picked up on from our last meeting related to some ways that we can begin to bring more students in for some in-person services. I'm going to have Dr. Alme talk about several of those as well, and then basically turn it over to Executive Director Fowler, CFO Cooper, and Assistant Superintendent Bongard to give us an update and talk a little bit about how the conversations have been going with our union groups, particularly with the Issaquah Education Association. So at the last meeting, we talked about, there was a number of things not specific to the bulk of our work, which has been around our desire to bring back in our youngest learners or our preschool through third grade learners. And, but I did want to talk about some of the other things that are happening as well. So we've had some conversations about how we are engaging students through clubs and activities and the performing arts. And just briefly wanted to update, I've been paying more attention to this now as buildings and teachers are pushing out messages, and just wanted folks to know that there are efforts happening right now to increase some of the clubs and activities, get some of our ASBs involved. And most of the things that they're having to do are they're doing in a virtual manner. Obviously, because they're trying to mitigate against the spread of the COVID, the virus, but have seen that we are some performing arts opportunities, such as in some of our elementary schools, virtual choir clubs, and some art assignments as well. Interesting, when we do those materials pickup days and drop off, we're pushing out some CTE and art supplies as well. And then again, trying to, and I've heard from a number of our middle school and high school ASBs, ways that those kids are trying to build school spirit and get some more engagement. And it's very challenging for them right now, because of course what everybody wants is to be able to meet together. And of course that's what we're being told not to do right now as it relates to the virus. But there were a couple of other things. So that work is moving forward and will continue to move forward, and we'll continue to work to try to use as much creativity as we can to engage our students in those activities. But I did want to talk, because we had quite a conversation at the last board meeting too, about athletic pods for training and conditioning, and about some of our facilities use. So Dr. Alme, if you would go ahead and cover, our athletic pods and our field rentals. And then I know Executive Director Hood is here as well. She may have a few more details too. So Josh, why don't you go ahead and give us an update on those two fronts?
Yeah, so our high school athletic our 5-person athletic conditioning pods, we are planning on starting those. The first kind of wave that we're starting those, we're going to be scheduling those throughout, but the first few pods that will start up, we're planning on December 2nd. Executive Director Hood, who's here with us, is working closely with our athletic directors and our coaches to finalize the schedules and groupings. But the plan is to start with those first few pods on December 2nd. That's next Wednesday. And then also we are planning in opening up our field space starting on December 8th. To our community groups. And that will give us time to set our calendars for our athletic conditioning pods for the ISD students who will be taking part in that. And then we will be able to work with our different community groups to schedule our outdoor fields in the spaces that are available there. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot version. Donna, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, any more specifics?
Yeah, just really proud of the work the ADs have done. It has been a lot of moving parts. And I think one of the biggest challenges, I have to give a shout out to my colleagues in HR. They have hustled to help us with very different CPR and first aid training for some of our coaches who are in need of an update, and we couldn't get it in the same way we used to. So they are working through that with us and have been incredibly helpful. So I just want to give them a big shout out for doing that. And lots of rolling starts, just as some coaches had some personal and professional commitments to tend to, but they've done a great job in a short amount of time.
Donna, could you also, I know WIA just recently announced a couple of changes too, maybe update us on that.
Yeah, so we had made a proposal to them as a district that KingCo, actually the board of directors really liked and got behind and said, hey, let's all present this. So we did together collectively. WIAA did put that up at their website as one of the 4 options they were considering, but ultimately they landed on a February 1st start date for season 2. If you remember, we have season 2, 3, and 4 now, and shortened all of them to 7 weeks. Those calendars are available at the WIAA website, and I posted links to those at the high school athletics page at the district site also. So we have links to them. People can easily Google it or use our site to launch to theirs. But they are planning a February 1st start date, shortened seasons, but still retaining 3.
Great. Thank you for that update. And I know some may be asking also about our athletic fees. And if I understand it correctly, we are treating this current time of athletic training and conditioning pods as summer school. We don't charge an athletic fee for summer not
for
summer school,
athletics, right?
Summer off season, yeah. And so we won't be charging the athletic fees until the actual season starts.
Right. And I have not yet had a chance to talk with Martin and Mariah in our business office, but we had originally thought we'd start collecting them on the 28th of December. So I suspect it makes sense to shift them, but I do want to discuss that further with them before we pick the day that we're going to start.
Well, I really do appreciate the efforts, and I do think it's really important that we try to find opportunities for these secondary students, particularly these high school students. We're well aware of the negative impacts of isolation is having on students, and we want to be able to provide that. And I have to say, one of the things that really moved me too from the last discussion we had related to field usage was the idea that without our fields being open, we were actually creating situations where we were overcrowding other fields. And in a world in which we want to maintain physical distancing, best not to do that. So I'm pleased that we'll be able to do that. I appreciate the work that everybody has done to kind of turn on that. So again, athletic training and conditioning pods coming. Those details are being worked out right now for our high school students. And then field rentals will be coming shortly on the heels of that as well. So thank you for that, the efforts that you've all put in on that. And I know that our students and families will appreciate having those expanded opportunities. Josh, and then I wanted you to touch briefly too on an update. We've completed our high school scheduling survey, and we're getting ready to launch an engagement survey. So two important data points, gathering points for us. So if you could chat to those a little bit, and then kind of what we plan to do with some of that data as we collect it.
Sure, yeah. And actually, we are mostly done with collecting data. We'll be all the way done tomorrow. So we've collected data on, as we said we would at the end of August. We wanted to give the current remote schedule in our high schools after we got some feedback of a little bit of trepidation around, you know, especially the Mondays and Tuesdays of those schedules in late August as we got ready to launch those. And we said that once we gave them some chance to work, we would get feedback on that and how they were working for folks. So we have surveyed our high school teachers, our high school parents, and our high school students, each with an independent survey. Those closed early mid last week. We just recently gotten the feedback on that. And then we also gave a survey to our paraprofessionals who are working in high school classrooms. And I believe that closes tomorrow. So we will have that information. We have a lengthy meeting set up for the earlier part of next week where we're going to sit down and take a look at that data and then look at next steps. And we will also report that data out to the public in the weeks to follow as well. So, you know, we've completed those surveys and we are jumping into the data here pretty quickly. And the public will find out what that data said and what we are looking at for next steps on that. So that is a work in progress. And then I would also say that we've been working, Executive Director Mellish and I, a group of other people with the Center for Educational Effectiveness. That's a consulting group that does surveys, large-scale surveys for school districts and whatnot, to do a survey K-12 on remote engagement, on student engagement in our remote learning efforts these first 2.5, 3 months. We gave them our areas of interest, CEE, and they brought together a bank of questions for each of these surveys. Cabinet members took a peek at those and gave some feedback. It was finalized with CEE. It's now being translated into different languages. Our plan is for that to go out sometime the week of December 7th. It's going to go out into email addresses of parents, of teachers, and of students, but we are also going to let them know via e-news and also let students know during their weekly Zooms, just so they have a reminder to take that survey. Again, we're going to distribute it the week of December 7th. We don't know exactly what day that's going to be, whether it's going to be the 7th or the 8th or the 9th, but that's the week that we're targeting that it's going to happen. CEE creates a Tableau dashboard with survey results, and our results will be ready by the 18th for our administrative team to review and all of our building administrative teams to review as part of their SIP. So we are the survey is finalized. We're getting that translated right now. We've targeted the week that we're going to get that out to folks. So it's just a matter now of putting the final pieces together and getting that out here in about a week and a half.
Great. Thank you for that update, Dr. Almy. And now an important update that we want to provide is regarding the ongoing labor talks that we've had, and we've had labor conversations with really all of our unions and entered into a number of memorandums of understanding related to our contracts as well. And I just want to, before I turn it over to Natalie and the team, show my appreciation really for all of those folks from all of the labor groups who have spent a lot of time trying to figure out and problem solve just a really lot of new things to us and complicated at times. You know, I was in a call earlier today with some other superintendents who are in their first year, and they referenced how they were rookies in dealing with this. And I pointed out, we're all rookies in dealing with a pandemic. And so I really, well, bargaining can be very frustrating at times, but you know, we are in the time of year to give gratitude and thanks. So I do want to thank everybody who's been coming to the team from IEA and from SEIU and PSE and Teamsters and food service. I mean, all of our groups. I know that people care a lot about who they work with and about this organization, and of course about our students. And so I appreciate the time they put in, because I know it's not easy. And so thank you. And thank you, Natalie and Jake and Jody and Dr. Wood, who have been the core of our team, and then all of those from my cabinet who have come in from time to time also. So Natalie, I think it'd be good to start with you, and you can kind of provide for us what has been going, and I think a lot's been going well at the tables and at the talks, and maybe, you know, just kind of give us an update on where things stand today.
Okay. So thank you. I went ahead and just put some slides together just so everybody could have something to look at instead of just me. So everybody can see that? Thumbs up, Superintendent Thiele? Okay. So this is just over the 7 weeks or so that we've been meeting with IEA, we've collaborated and worked through a variety of topics that are necessary to bring back our K-3 students safely and responsibly to in-person/hybrid learning. I've greatly simplified the bullets on this slideshow. Just wanted to give you some general pieces that we have discussed at the table, that we've tentatively agreed to, but really just kind of broad brushstrokes. They are much more detailed at the table than they are as I'm presenting them, but just wanted to give you an idea of what we have been discussing. So, well, of course I can't go forward. Hold on. Sorry. Let's do this one. No, see, I never can figure out how to next. There we go. All right, so one of the things that we have come to a tentative agreement on is the daily schedule, and we're looking at a 3.5-hour in-person AM instruction for our K-3 students, with the PM live remote instruction with their teacher continuing their learning day. Wednesday would be a fully remote day as it is currently, with the same daily schedule as we are currently experiencing. There's a lot, again, like I said, these are just broad strokes on bullet points. There's lots of details that go around just a daily schedule, like lunches and planning and transportation and, you know, exits and entrances, but this is just one of the things that we have accomplished at the table. Next is, we also have had a lot of discussions around COVID supervisors. So we do have COVID supervisors at each building, along with backups for when the COVID supervisor is unavailable or doing some other duty. We have trained all our COVID supervisors to date, and we also discussed communication and notification protocols around COVID supervisors and the different roles and responsibilities that are needed to implement the COVID protocols that we are currently doing now that we have students in our buildings. We also had a lot of discussions around facilities preparation. Some of the pieces that includes are setting up classroom capacities based on physical distancing of 6 feet. We have had discussions around attestation stations when students come to school, and the attestation protocols that we will have them follow. As you can imagine, with just like when you all go to the grocery store or to stores or to restaurants, there's all this additional signage. And so how that translates to our school buildings was discussed. We also have talked about PPE allocation and delivery based on also what roles and responsibilities individual staff members have, that might dictate a different level of PPE for that staff member. Lots of discussion around isolation room designation and protocols, and then discussion around ventilation system checks. So lots of things around facilities prep. We also have systems preparation that we have discussed, including finalizing building COVID mitigation plans. So this, I want to give a shout out to all our elementary principals who have been extremely thoughtful and diligent about putting together really comprehensive building mitigation plans that really spell out all the different protocols that we are going to follow at our buildings. We also have discussed what the training for staff will look like as we ramp up to bringing students back in person. And then also piece and parcel with that is the transition time for in-person teachers to prepare for their students to return. Kind of that pivot time between being 100% remote to being in person. We also have discussed communication timelines, including what type of notice we feel is appropriate for staff, what we feel is appropriate for families, notice of required trainings that teachers and staff members will need to attend, and then also how we may communicate to our families about the safety and health protocols so that they are well prepared to have their students enter our buildings, and then also maybe even doing some front loading with their kids in order to prepare them for that day. So that is in a nutshell. Like I said, it doesn't give it justice just in bullet points, because it was a lot of discussion and a lot of really, really good planning and collaboration to come up with all these things that I think are going to help bring our students back safely.
Thank you, Natalie. And I am going to ask Jody and Jake to chime in, but I do want to just point out it is complicated and it is very time consuming to talk about every detail of what type of PPE do I wear in this type of situation, or how do we, what are the protocols for recess or going to the restrooms. So these are important agreements though, and related to problem solving some very challenging problems related to virus mitigation. But I really do, again, appreciate all of the good thinking and problem solving that everybody on all the sides of this have put in, because this is how we're going to keep our students and ourselves safe. And I believe there is a growing body of evidence that says when we do these things, we really truly can mitigate the spread of the virus, and we can keep one another healthy. So Jody, Jake, I know you've been spending hours and hours at the table, and I'm sure you have thoughts about how things are going and where things might be going next. So I don't know who wanted to jump in, Jody or Jake or.
I can, Superintendent. I think all tables, I'm like you, we have also bargained with Natalie's summary was focused on teachers, or IEA in particular, but all our labor groups, we have had multiple MOUs beginning in March, as again, nobody's ever had to bargain the impact of a pandemic on the workplace. I think it's a first for all of us. I think the only thing, obviously, the next direction for the district and the IEA to take is to take a look at the metrics that would allow us to have students re-enter the school site along with staff. And so that is where we're at in the negotiations currently, at least with IEA. So things are collaborative, but again, the team has a lot of experience, at least on the district side, and there's a lot of new topics up for collective bargaining. So, health and safety first, which is a big hurdle that a lot of districts haven't crossed yet. So we are proud of the work we've done there. But again, we're working on next potential metrics for entry, and so that is where the parties are at. Jody?
Yeah, and I would just want to underscore the Executive Director Fowler mentioned some of the plans and just the depth and detail involved in all 15 of our elementary principals created COVID building mitigation plans for in-person learning, and they are extremely detailed and comprehensive. In addition to that, they also, under the guidance of Assistant Superintendent Lisa Heckman, and with her help providing templates from the toolkit, created building isolation protocols, plans for each building in the event that there is a suspected case, how to follow through, letters that get written. So very, very detailed, 2 different plans to help guide us when we do return to in-person. And that could also help in our conversations at the table with ensuring that we are keeping in mind health and safety of staff and students.
That's great. Again, really appreciate it, Jody. And hopefully this helps reassure folks that when we do have an agreement, when our plan has been agreed to by all parties and the time is right, they can feel confident coming back to work in or sending their children to learn in our school buildings. So I think President Maraldo, I noticed that it's already 6:31. So I'm gonna put my governor on and quiet myself down now and take any questions or anything that the board needs at this point.
Okay, well, I think the next thing we were going to do is public input. And I'll take between 6 or 7. And the first, for the first set, and that would be, I'm looking for those that would like to give feedback to the board about staying remote. So if you would like to, if your public input is in regards to staying remote, I will welcome 2 minutes per person, up to 15 minutes. So I would suspect around 7 people. And with that, I will start with Jeff Brown. And please give your name and attendance area. Okay, I have.
Right, have you unmuted me?
You are unmuted, but I don't see you.
Oh, well, I don't have my video on right now, but I'll do that in a moment. My name is Jeff Brown, and I know that there is lots of evidence that there is a very little risk to the children for spreading or contracting the disease. We have lots of school systems in other parts of the country that are open for business, but yet we are not. Why not?
Is your discussion about wanting to stay remote?
No, I want my kids to be back in school where they belong.
Okay, so I'm going to do that input. So raise your hand later. I'll do that in a few minutes. I'm taking up to 7 comments, about 2 minutes for people who want to stay remote right now. So I'll call
you're going to
you
respond
later.
to my question when it's my turn? Are you going to respond to my question though?
This is public input, so it's only input, and you're welcome to share your input. It's not output. So it's your time to share with your board.
So you'll ignore me.
That's not what I
You'll
said.
ignore me. That's fine.
Again, this is public input. And that's what we do here. So it is not a time for dialogue. So I have Ms. Murphy is next on my list. Okay, Mrs. Murphy, last call.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Did it work?
Yes, we do not see your face, but we can hear you.
I just got out of the shower.
Gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, so 2 minutes public input to the board.
All right. Just to be quite honest, this is all like really exhausting. It feels like the school board in some ways has already made up its mind to return despite the numbers. So like here we are with an emergency board meeting the week before Thanksgiving, the week before elementary grades are due, the week before conferences. And a lot of us feel like we need to drop everything and try to come here and convince the board to follow science, to follow public health, and to just do the right thing. And here we all are still over Zoom because we don't feel safe yet, even meeting in person for a board meeting. As more recent studies have started coming out, as children have been returning to schools around the country, in areas where the virus is already low, it doesn't seem to cause any additional spread. But in areas where the numbers are high, it is contributing to spreading the virus. And some studies have even referred to children as silent spreaders who play a larger role than previously thought in spreaded COVID-19. But it feels like we're still, for some reason, insisting that we return too soon, despite OSPI's guidelines, despite advice from public health, despite the fact that all the other local districts are planning for the future and not for right now, despite the fact that the CDC has just asked all of America to refrain from meeting together over the holidays, and despite our county itself and its growing numbers. And so I would just urge you guys to really link all of our planning to the numbers. We all want students back into school. We all want in-person learning to resume, but just not until it's safe. So you guys have been doing such great planning with the union, and there are such great guidelines that will be in place once it is safe to return. But I just urge you to consider linking everything to the actual numbers themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Jeffrey Chen. Jeffrey Chen.
Yep, just got unmuted. School Board Director, Superintendent Thiele, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. Really appreciate it. My name is Jeff Chen, a parent of 2 Skyline High School students. So at the last school board meeting 2 weeks ago, I spoke in favor of opening schools when it's safe to do so. And at that time, I shared data showing that the COVID rate had increased in our area by 29% in the previous 2 days. I'd like to now update that data. So in the last 2 weeks since November 9th, the COVID rate within ISD boundaries has now increased by 139%. So it's 139%. And the same rate, I'll say that the rate in King County is only increased by 82%. So big numbers. So currently there's 232 cases per 100,000 residents in the ISD geographic area, which was far above the 50 to 75 rate that was discussed about 8 months ago as being safe for returning to school. So I would say, given how fast we've seen the rate of COVID case changes, I would suggest that the school board look beyond setting just a specific rate for sending children and teachers back to school, and would ask the school board consider trends of whether the COVID rate is staying steady or decreasing for at least a month, given how fast we see things can change. So sending kids back to school in the first week of January is probably the worst time of year to be able to clearly see these kinds of trends. It's the time of year during the holidays that people are most likely to be socializing with other people. And we've also seen with the flu that the flu also peaks in December and February. So I mentioned that the current COVID rate in King County is currently 354 cases per 100,000 people. And just in comparison, the first spring peak in April 6th was at a rate of 114, and the summer peak on July 26th was a rate of 116. And I'll note that this increase was with very few students and teachers currently in school buildings across King County. So I think it's fine to consider the criteria at this point for returning to school, but given that our current rate of COVID in King County is more than 300% what we saw in the previous 2 peaks, it doesn't seem like the trends are really good right now, and I don't see that returning to school in the next 2 months is a safe or realistic possibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Dorana Burkholder. Okay, go ahead. Are you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm Dorana Burkholder, IEA president. And I just wanted to say that we continue to make progress with our partners from the district. And we are finalizing dates and looking at continuing our bargaining. We want to thank all the parents and community members who shared their words of encouragement and support. We know that during this time, it's a difficult time, and we know as community members, we need to all do our part to help stop the spread of the virus. We also know that the safety protocols and procedures need to be put in place for us to return safely for our students and staff and community. Issaquah teachers are the members and leaders of IEA, and we will continue to be committed to supporting our students and working in partnership. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Molly Okay, go ahead. Yes, we can.
Hi, I teach first grade at Grand Ridge, and my statement that I just kind of wanted to share is more food for thought for the district and also for the school board. We've heard a lot about safety, and safety is obviously really important, but I also want to consider the instruction that that I believe a lot of families are looking for and are hoping for when we come into the building. And I think it's important to remember that, you know, obviously teachers believe in brick and mortar. We believe in being back in the classroom and having what we consider to be a regular year. I think it's important to know that just because we walk into the building doesn't mean we're going to have what we had. And so it's really important that as we're doing this planning, that we take the time to do it intentionally. And we think about those little things, like when I'm doing a writing instruction with my little ones and they're independent writing, I have my little stool and I'm going around and I'm crouching down and I'm looking at their writing person to person and doing that conferring with them. And right now I'm doing that on Zoom in small groups. Is it as good as me being on a stool next to them in the building? No, it's not. But when we get into the building, I don't know how I'm going to do it at all because I can't get within 6 feet of them. As they're working on their writing, I'm not going to know what they're writing because I can't get that close. And the same thing, especially with math. Reading instruction is going to be the priority in primary classes. So that small group time, which I'm so grateful that you added to the end of the day because it's so crucial. I am concerned about how I'm going to best support my kids and know where they are when I can't get close to them and they can't hold up their work to the screen like they can on Zoom. So just thinking about what we're going to do to support our teachers, how we're going to get creative and train our teachers so that when it is safe and we can re-enter the building, we can mitigate some of those issues, because although safety is obviously the top priority, I think it's important to remember that we also need to think about how we're going to support those learners, especially those ones who need services like our LAP program that supports below grade level readers, our ELL, how we're going to support them when they have such a short amount of time at the end of the in-person day to have that interaction, and being able to schedule that. Our support staff has been so amazing in trying to figure out the schedule with this remote learning, and having an even shorter window is going to make it a lot more challenging. So just thinking about what we can do to make sure we're prioritizing, thinking through all those little details that the district mentioned earlier, and making sure that we're doing this the best that we can and not rushing it. Because when I do get back into that room, I want to know that I'm giving my kids the best instruction I can. And I'm nervous about not being able to smile at them. And I'm nervous about having to stand against my whiteboard to make sure that I keep them safe and I'm 6 feet apart. So just recognizing that we need to be able to make them feel happy and supported in that building. And it's not just the building.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Sebastian Lindman.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, y'all. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for your hard work. I definitely can tell you guys are putting some thought into this. And as I understand it, what you guys are looking at now is trying to produce some metrics to see when return to school can happen. I just want to say, I think that going back to Jeffrey Chen's point of looking at, an actual form for this and looking at timelines and looking at an average and time that's going to fit, not just a set number. I think that would be a better way to build a metric that works for everybody than just picking a number and saying at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and return. I do see the teachers really doing great work. I'm not going to lie, my son's had some struggles lately with some of this because the time doing remote is a little bit different, and kids are, they're smart. They know, and they can kind of get away with some stuff on remote, and they try to do it, and we have to work as parents. And I want to thank all the parents out there that are putting the time in to be with their kids, and for those that don't, providing a good stable source of somebody to help them with their schoolwork. But I want to say, looking at several friends across many different states that are in the education field and that are also parents, most of what's been happening that's been disruptive to their lives is if we rush this, these things happen and then we go back and then we'll get sent back to remote. And I know for the younger kids, it's going to be really hard to adjust, because getting these kids into this rhythm to do remote learning, has taken a lot of effort from the teachers, a lot of effort from the parents. I just want you guys to be really cautious of the fact that these kids can't be jumping back and forth. Look at the situation in other countries. Please look at the situation in other states and try to just weigh those averages and figure out what's best for everybody. I know, we have a choice at this point, but I also would like to see us do this together as a community and kind of build some of those relationships back again. And I also want you guys to always think about our teachers, because they are the backbone of this education system here in Issaquah. They have done everything they possibly can. They are highly adaptive. I work with engineers all the time. I don't think they've got anything on these teachers, because the amount they have to deal with, especially with these kids, it's difficult. And I watch it every day because I sit over my son's shoulder and I see the work that's being put in here. So just please be mindful that trends would probably be better than hard numbers. Use those trends, come up with realistic metrics, and let's do this together as a community.
Okay, thank you. I have Roslyn Osuagu.
Hello. Just trying to start my, thank you for sending the requests. Hi, I first of all, again, want to thank the school board, the district, all the teachers for all of the work that you guys are putting in to making sure that, parents and teachers and everybody has a plan. I just want to echo what some of the other parents said. Everybody wants our children to return in person. I personally have 2 daughters that attend Challenger Elementary School. They are in 1st and 4th grade. They're doing very well with remote learning, but I know that's not the case for many students. And my hesitation to send them to school is actually just what the previous parent just said, is with breaking that routine that they currently have. They have alarms set, timers set for when they need to attend classes. The teachers that both of them have, as well as the specialists, do an awesome job of making sure that they're engaged. And again, I know that's not the case for all families. And so I really, really wish that the school district would consider those students who are second, who don't speak English as their primary language, those students that are homeless, those students that, don't have parents at home that can help them with online learning. I would, again, very much love to have my students return to school, but I really struggle with the fact that if they do get in school, then what if an outbreak occurs? Then we're going to have to transition them back home. And also, as a working mother, as an essential employee in the financial industry, I also have to be concerned about transportation. So I live close enough to the school where my students could walk to school, but she's going to go to school for 3.5 hours. So now I've got to think about bringing them to school, bringing them back from school, or paying for them to be in Basque. So I just wonder if you guys have thought about, again, we would love our kids to return, but now we've got an interruption in the middle of the day. We've got to make sure that our students are getting to and from school. And then again, if something happens in the classroom. So please, with those things in mind, with the hard work that our teachers are currently doing, I really hope that those things can be addressed. I really love the idea of them rotating days.
2 minutes.
Thank you so much. And just hope that you could guys provide some more transparency as to why 3.5 hours per day. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now I would like to call on those that are here because they want to speak to going back to school, having in-person learning. And again, I'll take probably about 6 people. And again, you are always welcome. And if one of my board members could type in, or the staff could type in the email address in the chat box for anybody who wants to send an email to the school board, you are welcome to do that. So if I don't call on you today, it does not mean that we don't listen to you. It does not mean that we don't have time to hear you. We will read those emails as well. So I'm going to call back on Jeff Brown, and I promise, just because we don't respond and answer questions does not mean we are ignoring you. I am very interested in what you have to say, Mr. Brown.
No, I apologize. I was caught a bit unaware. I was not expecting to be the very first one called on since there were no other options for chat. I've just been reading an article in the New York Times from yesterday that says that children don't seem to be the risk of spreading coronavirus that we long thought that they were. I believe that there's been a recent death in one of the high schools that could be attributed to isolation associated with COVID. And I think that the ancillary effects on the children are starting to get to a level where it's important that they be back in an in-person learning situation that they haven't been able to get into. The data is fairly consistent that children have very minimal impacts when they are associated with COVID. And if we have learned anything through the past 9 months or so, it's that there are protocols that we can put in place for the adults who are at risk to reduce the level of risk associated with their potential exposure to COVID-19. And I just wish that we could do more to think of the mental health and well-being of our children and less on the, I guess, the bureaucratic aspects of what we have to do to get back to school. And that's all.
Great. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to call on Brooke Sullivan.
Oh, good. You can see me. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. Okay, my name is Brooke Sullivan. I have 2 kids at IVE and 2 in a local preschool. They've been safely attending in person since the beginning of April. My husband and I went to K-12 public schools, and I really believe in public educations for many reasons. Just one being the diversity of all who are there attending, teaching, volunteering, and serving. The beautiful weave of people give the kids a worldview that you do not necessarily get from private schools. I think the saying is, a rising tide lifts all boats. All that said, I am sad to say that we have started the process to enroll our fall 2021 kindergartner into a local private school. Open house is December 3rd, and applications are due February 5th. I share this as a fact and not a threat in any way. We have not made the decision for our 2 current ISD students, but we are starting that conversation as well. We do not take this decision lightly for all the reasons I stated above, but the failure of the district to obtain an agreement with their labor groups has completely eroded our confidence in our system. Waiting is no longer an option. In an absence of information and a plan, more people like our family will make decisions as private school deadlines will come and go before another 7 weeks of bargaining can happen. When one student leaves, the district loses thousands of dollars. When droves of student leaves, this will significantly impact ISD resources, staffing, and the schools we love will not look like the schools we left in March. The recovery will take years, and under current circumstances may never fully happen. As long as we have lived in Issaquah, bonds and levies have passed fairly easily, and we have taken that for granted. Confidence is already eroded, but I guarantee these ballot measures will start to meet stiff resistance from people who've always been staunch supporters. I understand closing schools was the easy part and reopening is much more complicated. I do appreciate the work that's been done, but it's not nearly enough for 7 weeks of work. As Superintendent Thiele stated, there's a growing body of evidence cited by Harvard, the New York Times, the Atlantic, just to name a few reputable sources that we've all read in recent weeks. We owe it to our kids to use this information to guide us. We missed the window in the early fall because there was no agreement. The numbers were well below the science-guided state guidelines, but the statement was that people were not comfortable. We had metrics, we did not use them. Comfort is not a metric. We must learn from the mistakes from our past and not miss the next opportunity to do right by our kids. The time has come for the district and labor groups to literally sit in a room and not come out until agreement is reached. Please restore the confidence of your community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on Karen Decker, I'm sorry, Karen Deacon. Okay, you're unmuted on my side, but I still can't hear you on your side.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, sorry. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm a working mom of four children, 3 of which have graduated through Skyline High School and are thriving. They're thriving at university. They're thriving in industry. And I'm super proud of the work that the ISD school district and teachers have made a commitment to my children. I do have, my 4th child is a 7th grader at Pine Lake. A couple of thoughts I had tonight is first and foremost, we have to protect our elderly. We have to protect those who are at risk, and we have to protect those who have precondition. And that should not waver. But I do disagree with the one size fits all. We need to let the data decide. We are living in the highest technology era of our time. We have more studies and more data that show that children and teachers are not super spreaders, including indications by the CDC. The second thing I'd like to point out is that once we decide as a community that in-person school is essential, it is amazing how people can rally to make these environments safe. I look at what we've done with our retail. I look at what we've done with our hospitals. I look at what we've done for our goods and services. This country is an amazing country when we come together as a single mindset. And I believe truly that if we can, as a school board, as a teacher, and as a community, treat in-person schooling as an essential, our children are going to benefit. Lastly, I'm a working mom, but if there is volunteering that is needed by parents to help with safety checks, check-ins, I will renegotiate my work hours with my work if it means volunteering a few hours a week to support in-person schooling. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'm going to call on Colin Kay.
Start my video. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Actually, Colin's my son. My name is Matt Kanupka. I'm sitting in my house here, and I appreciate the time to speak, and I appreciate the effort that's been put into this. But I have to agree with some of the parties that spoke prior just now. This has been going on since March. I feel like there's been ample opportunity to come up with a solution or a resolution that would be amenable to most people. No longer on the stage where this is a surprise, and the fact that we don't have, we have businesses and hospitals and all sorts of other industries that have come up with protocols and ways to mitigate the spread of the virus.
I am so sorry. Your internet connection is breaking up so much that we're not able to. Is it just me or is there other board members? I'm not able to understand what you're saying. Yeah. So is there any way you can write up your remarks and email them to us?
I could do that if I can, if everybody's not hearing me well enough, I guess.
Yeah, we're not. It's like a robot's giving us every other word.
Okay, I'll try to time up then.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to go next then to Nate Perea.
Thanks, Marnie. To the board and to all that have spoken so far. We've heard a lot of stats and a lot of info, and I'd just like to point out that the CDC, the American Association of Pediatrics, the Washington State Department of Health, and many, many other notable scientific sources have all stated that kids need to be back in school. And our own governor specifically called out K through 12 as exempt from the most recent lockdown restrictions. We all need to adopt the mindset that education is an essential service. In the last 2 weeks, we've had 1,100 parents sign a petition and almost 700 join our group who want the choice for those who need to return to in-person learning to be available. The choice, not a mandate, not a restriction, a choice. These numbers are continuing to grow every day of parents getting on board with us. I'd also like to reiterate what's already been said tonight. Comfort is not a metric. We are all aware that the delay in this process is because of determining what case count level people are going to be comfortable with before we return. Comfort is not a metric. What is also not comfortable is the deteriorating mental health of children and growing number of suicides in our district and in our county. We want an MOU and an action plan set to begin to return to the classroom by the start of January. Failing to do so is going to quickly start impacting us all. As was stated, January, February is when private school applications are due. Parents are going to start making decisions for next year. Our district is going to continue to lose money as those students walk out the door. Also, to reiterate, we have a levy replacement campaign coming up in a little more than a year. That's $50 million to the district that funds part of teacher pay, a lot of administrative help, and a lot of other programs that we need. These have all passed easily in the past in recent years. I can't say that's the case this year if we don't get kids back in school. More eyes of parents are on this levy process that's about to start than ever before. We need our children back in school because it is an essential service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jennifer Harrington. I know, Jennifer, you've been at several meetings with your hand raised and I haven't gotten to you, so I'm making a point this time.
Hi, thank you. I'm a parent of 2 children at Issaquah Middle School. And I share the echo other people that I'm extremely frustrated that while I feel like we've been talking.
Oh, you're muted for some reason. I've asked to unmute.
Is it unmuted?
There you go.
Okay, good. I'm a parent of 2 children at IMS. I share the frustrations of many that while we've been talking about having a choice to return to school since March, we still don't have a single agreed upon set of metrics for doing so. We had a really hardworking committee work all summer long to flesh out these safety details that I feel like were just kind of represented to us. So I'm just frustrated about what we've accomplished in these past couple months. As Nate said, we cannot let subjective terms such as comfortable and safe be the barometer for returning to in-person instruction. We need a hard and objective metric. Whether we open today or a month from now or whatever, if we can't get our staff to agree to a hard set of metrics, and that's a big problem. Nobody's trying to force anyone back, and remote should remain an option for anyone that chooses it. Friends of mine have moved out of state. Some sent their children to live with relatives to attend schools out of state. More than I can count have left for private schools. Had you told me that we would be remote for a good part of this year, or even all this year for all we know, I absolutely would have made other choices for my family, and I myself am looking at other choices for my children next year. Instead, I feel like we've been given false hope every couple months, only to have the terms renegotiated over and over whenever we get closer to reopening. Despite the best efforts of our staff, I know they're really working hard. It's just not working for too many of our children, and they deserve the choice to be in person with safety precautions in place. As Nate said, our children are literally dying in front of us at this point in time. Some are known, as we heard with the most recent spikes in suicide, but for many others, we'll never have any idea the true damage that we did to them until it's far too late to do anything about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last person I'm going to call on is going to be Kelly Stone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I have 2 children in the district. I have an 8th grader and I have a 3rd grader. And I just wanted to offer a personal viewpoint. I mean, I'll start by saying that I agree wholeheartedly that, we need like actual metrics and transparency. I hear that there are good negotiations going on and we appreciate that, but I feel safe is not a quantifiable metric that parents can rely on to make plans. And if we're going to talk about feeling safe, I will tell you that my children, I'm concerned, are no longer safe being at home doing remote learning. I don't want to reveal too much about their privacy, but my husband and I both work full time in jobs that fortunately we are able to be home, but we are not able to supervise them. And they are largely alone in their rooms all day doing remote learning. I have no idea. Sometimes my 3rd grader's teacher emails me and says, "Where is he? He's not on." I don't know because I'm working. Both of my kids are in therapy. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had both therapists and a school counselor reach out to me because they are concerned for their safety, their mental health safety. And like I said, in front of a group like this, I won't reveal much more about their privacy, but this is a serious concern. And the only thing I can say to my kids' teachers and counselors are, I appreciate how hard that you are working, because they are working. There's a lot of teaching going on. And I love my kids' teachers. They've done an amazing job. I don't know how much learning's going on, because my message to my children is we just have to get through this till we can get back in school. And now when I can't even tell them when we might think that will be, it's further deteriorating their mental health. So we need some actual metrics and an actual timeline of what that means, because I frankly don't know how much longer my kids can do this. And so we'll look at private schools, we'll look at other options. Homeschooling's not an option, like I said, because my husband and I both work full time. But I think parents deserve some more transparency and some more assurances that we're looking at everybody's safety, not just the teacher's safety or the administration's safety, but what about our kids too? So it's a huge concern, and we would like some more transparency and better metrics. Thanks.
Thank you. So as I said, we have received a lot of feedback from people. We do read all those emails that come into us as well. I think Stephen has put the email address in there. So if you did not get an opportunity to speak publicly today, please feel free to email us as well. And we do read those. So thank you for that input. I tried to be pretty equitable with that as far as time and the number of speakers. So with that, it's time for the board to begin to have our conversation. So wanted to open that up to my board members. If anyone would like to either questions or comments regarding what you've heard either from staff or from the public. And don't all raise your hand at once. Suzanne.
I was going to wait, but I can start. A couple of things. First off, I do want to give a shout out to the bargaining teams for the amount of work that they've done around the safety and the PPE and all the things that Natalie went through. I think that is critically important, not only for staff to feel that they're safe, but for our students and our parents to be comfortable sending students into school. So I think that is hugely important. I want to, we need to figure out, okay, first off, we had a lot of people saying it would not be appropriate to send kids to school right now as cases are increasing. And I don't think any of us are talking about bringing kids into school tomorrow with the case rates where they are. But as we said at our last meeting, it's about the plan, and it's about moving forward with the plan, and it's about establishing what are the metrics, what are the case rates or whatever metrics that we're using, at which point we would flip a switch and say, yes, it's time to bring students back into school. It's time to bring K1 back into school, because remember, right now we're talking K1. And I think it's important that we all agree on what those metrics are. And I know there's a lot of opinions, so I will just start by giving a shout out to the concept of using a local metric. When Ann and I worked on, Director Moore and I worked on this a while, trying to figure out how would you develop a local metric based on the actual case data that is published by King County. King County is a huge place. And if you look on that website right now and look at the different zip codes or the different cities or whatever, where we are up in Issaquah, it's not great, but it's lighter blue. And if you go down into the further southwestern areas of the county that are quite a distance away from us, it's very dark blue. So those numbers, when you look at the county, those numbers get quite a bit swayed by areas that are quite far from us. So, we worked really hard to figure out what zip codes and what census tracts and what city boundaries and whatever were in our local area. I do understand that we have staff that live outside of the ISD, but all of our students are within the ISD. And I trust our staff to be safe with one another, to maintain their distancing, wear their masks, wash their hands, do all the appropriate things that grown-ups know how to do, and be safe from one another. So the concern is around the kids, and the kids are local. So my hope would be that at least one of the measures that we use to bring kids back into school would be a local measure.
Anne.
I would agree with what Suzanne said. And I will also reference that local measure, or really the measure or metric we use, it will be a measure, or should be, that we have seen over a certain period of time, whether it's 7 days or something. It won't just be that it hits it for one moment and bam, we go, even if the very next moment it didn't. So yes, it will have to be able to see it hit that point for several days, so we feel like it's going to stay in that range before we move forward. And I also am very pleased to hear from Natalie and team about the bargaining and all the health and safety measures that have been agreed to by both sides, because I think that's really important, both for the health and safety of the students and the staff, and all the work that's been done in the buildings for the COVID mitigation with the COVID supervisors, and the building plans on how to manage the engagement of the teachers and the students, and then how incidents are handled, whether students might come in and have any COVID-like symptom at the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, how to isolate. I'm really pleased to hear that those detailed plans developed by every single principal have been created and are ready to be implemented when we get to the right time to have students back in school.
Sydney or Harlan? Harlan.
Sure. I wrote some things down so I don't forget them. First of all, I want to say thank you to our superintendent and his team for working on a plan to get our athletic facilities open. I think that creates more safety for our community, which is important. So thank you for that role in that. I look forward to, and I saw the email from Skyline that came out today, I think, talking about an update from the athletic director. My question for that specifically is, was a specific message sent out to our students who are not athletes or varsity athletes that may want to participate in this, so that there's a specific outreach, not just for it to be only for athletes, number one. And two, is there a similar process being developed for our activities, whether it's robotics or such like that? So those would be things that I would like to hear answers to before I go to my next item. But I really appreciate that, because I think it sends a message to our secondary students that we care about you, you're valued, and we really believe in, despite of this pandemic time, we want to do everything we can to support your mental health and social emotional well-being.
Director Gallinger, and Donna or Josh may need to chime in. I believe that the athletic training and conditioning pods are being built from the registrants for all the sports. So I don't think it included just the general student body. I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, that it was the students who actually registered for a sport, I believe, is who the pods was being set up for. On the activity side, I know there's some additional work being done there too. But I don't think we're as far along on that one.
Yeah, Superintendent Thelia, Donna probably needs to be unmuted, Stephen, as well, and she can chime in on this. It was not just students who have signed up for sports. It was open essentially to all students, just like we do for our summer workouts.
This is summer. I just want to be clear. It is summer, so we are abiding by all of those rules. So it did go out in building e-news. We also had already opened athletic registrations back in August, so anyone could register for all 3 seasons starting in August. And so many athletes did that was already handled. So we used our new tool in Final Forms to just message them also. And coaches are then following up to find out which of those kids who are already registered are interested and RSVP, if you will, so they can quickly break up their rosters into pods Monday, Tuesday, and be ready to go next Wednesday. So kids do have to register in final forms in order to turn out, but the entire student body was notified.
Thank you for that correction.
Yes.
Executive Director Hood.
Yes.
I like your plan way better than mine.
We do have to follow those rules. So I just wanted to make it clear that we are.
And there was a second question,
yes.
Director Gallinger.
Yes, about activities?
Yeah.
So right now, the governor's orders did say that we should not be doing in-building extracurriculars. So we are not doing anything in building that is extracurricular right now. I have opened a conversation with Natalie, though, about how we might approach finding out which of our staff are interested in club advising, and similar to our coach process, kind of surveying them to ascertain more information, how many folks are interested, who might be willing to offer what. I haven't yet gone there.
Now, Donna, we do have clubs currently meeting, but they're all
meeting virtually. So I am talking about the in-person meets, correct? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's something we can definitely, as we continue to work on, report back on our December 9th board meeting. As Donna and I and activity coordinators are working on that piece first. We're just trying to launch these athletic conditioning pods here the week we get back from Thanksgiving break.
Yeah, I just think we can't lose sight of the activity part, because we certainly don't want to send the message inequities that, oh, if you're an athlete, we care about your mental health, and if you're not, we don't. And I certainly, none of us are saying that, but I don't want our actions to reflect that either.
Absolutely. And Superintendent Thiele, we will work with you after tonight about the work we're going to do on that over the next week and a half.
And then I want to make a comment at the WASDA annual conference, and I know that we'll have time to talk about it later, but there was something that was pertinent to, I learned that in Bethel School District, they all open their day in their learning platform where they go into essentially like a general setting before they go into their classroom, which is almost like a breakout room, to where if they need to go to the office or access any sort of those resources, they can do that at the beginning and at the end of their days. And I thought that was a really neat thing, because it really is a proactive way to say, here's how we can, if you need help, here's how you reach out for help. So I would encourage a conversation with Bethel, maybe other school districts are doing it too with their platforms, but we have invested so much in social emotional learning, mental health resources. I want to make sure that they're actually utilized. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing that other districts are doing is their tier 2, what our equivalent of PBSES, includes in-person meetings or even home visits. So I wanted to know from a social emotional or a intervention part, what are we doing to support kids in tier 2? Because I think that we are behind, frankly, and due in large part to our negotiations, for lack of a better description, in doing these things. And kids are hurting, and we need to be supporting them. And if other districts across our region are out doing these things, we should be too. So I'm curious to know what we're actually doing from a tier 2 standpoint, and how do we actually move the needle in that way, because we have too many kids hurting.
So as far as our ability to serve tier 2, if I'm understanding correctly, I believe, I mean, we've had tentative conversations, and I've talked even publicly about some ways that we would like to support secondary students in, we're talking about athletic and conditioning pods, but in other pods as well, as a way to bring students in and support students. I hadn't heard about the idea that was just described from Bethel. I think that's interesting. But I know that as a staff, we've been talking about and identifying groups that we would like to see brought in. Some are not tier 2, some would even be at a higher tier and still need to be addressed. But Dr. Almy, I don't know if there's more that you know in terms of planning from PBSES and.
Yeah, obviously we continue to work to look to bring in groups of small students, but I know we're just having a conversation just today with Executive Director Morse about some home visits that we've been doing. Jason, I think Jason Morse needs to be unmuted, but he could speak to that a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Almy. I was able to unmute. Thank you, Mr. Collins. I appreciate that. Director Gallinger, specific to your question, I have worked most recently as last week. The home visit piece is kind of a challenging piece as far as staff safety and things of that nature. But Issaquah Middle primarily, and another one of my middle schools, we've worked with Dave Montalvo, our Director of Safety and Security, who has been able to go out to some residents and act as a liaison and really encourage ways for families to connect with us. And then once we kind of get that, it's almost like that first little contact is what it takes with a family to say, hey, we're here to help. We're not here to judge. We're here to provide resources. And I worked with 2 or 3 families through the building and through Dave Montalvo, and then pulling in our family liaison groups and leveraging our equity department, working with Elena. And we've seen, now again, I say this, a week ago, but we've seen responses that were very positive as far as connections we were having a hard time to facilitate becoming more streamlined and outreach being able to happen. One case in point, we were struggling with a family and some technology issues, and Dave was able to deliver new computers so the students could have an easier time accessing. So some of those situations, generally speaking, when we're talking tier 2 with those students, it's a lack of engagement, likely because there's barriers. And so it's really a barrier removal process. And we've seen some baby steps into that, and we're going to keep monitoring, obviously, to get to more of a full engagement approach. But that has been helpful. And then families that where engagement with the parents, at least, maybe is not such a barrier, is counselor meetings and bringing in those tier 2 teams to meet with students and really meet with parents and identify ways that at-home learning can be more successful. I did want to point out one other quasi, what I would say success is the engagement of kids at the middle level. We're seeing my buildings are doing a lot for online or remote access clubs, and they're seeing a high participation group with that. So those are things that we're trying to promote as well to encourage that efficacy as far as engagement goes. Josh?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we could unmute Executive Director Sividasan, just had a conversation with her today as well about the work that her and her department and her family partnership liaisons are doing to outreach to families in need. Elena, are you unmuted?
Yes, I am unmuted. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is that we do have an engagement committee that we have formed at the district office, which is made up of myself, folks from the student interventions department, and then our executive directors at the different school levels, just to ensure that we are targeting engagement in an effective way, and that all the different departments that would sort of wrap their support around students or buildings are in the loop with one another about what those engagement systems are looking like. And so that has been a very helpful process to have. I would speak, specifically to equity to make sure that students are not losing out on engagement due to access issues or concerns going on in the home. So we have put some steps in place and questions in place to ensure that we are getting to the bottom of those questions with our families. Jason had talked about earlier, we've also been leveraging the family partnership liaisons to reach out to families that maybe buildings are having a difficult time connecting with. And so that's been really helpful. I think a couple of just fruitful conversations or action items from that is we've been able to get a few families into before and after school care who maybe thought there were obstacles because they might not have had a pay stub to be able to use to verify income or those pieces. But it was really creating either a safety issue at home or a hindrance for the older students to be able to engage in their work because they were having to watch younger siblings. And so I have really appreciated the partnership with Jason and with Nate from Before and After School Care to be able to pull that off. I know also that Donna and I have been in conversation. I mean, she really did the lion's share of putting together a proposal around bringing in secondary students who have a high number of Fs, and then also looking at bringing in our homeless students. So these are all things that that we have put proposals together around and are hoping to be able to tackle shortly.
Any other questions, Harlan, before I move on?
I have lots, but I want to give other people a chance.
Okay. So Sydney, are you not unmuted here? Let me ask to unmute.
Thanks. That's why I was so quiet. I couldn't actually unmute.
Oh.
So this last conversation for me is really important, which are what are the additional supports for some of the other groups of learners that we've called out, the homeless, some of these other groups. So I would love if maybe we can schedule that in a future board meeting to talk specifically about what those proposals are by group and do that in a, the visual learner here, do that in a way that I feel like I can step through what we're talking about or what we're proposing for each group and what that plan may be. I do feel though, at least for me, I feel like I would like to get back to the original topic and the return to school topic and spend a little bit more time on that, if that's okay. So first, I do greatly appreciate the amount of time and effort that has gone into the process of coming to agreement. As I've said many times, I think being able to walk collectively to a point of agreement is really important to make sure we can all get there. I am worried though at this point, the amount of time that's transpired, if that's even what's possible here. So I am worried at this juncture that more time will continue to pass. I am worried that, it's a cup that can't be filled, to use a Kung Fu Panda reference of the conversation. So for example, I love getting through the specifics of the in-building safety. I believe those are almost identical to what we've had in place for quite some time in action in our buildings for a large period of time. And so I am struggling with understanding what is the next part of the conversation and what is the next hurdle. And for me, it would be incredibly helpful to get to the sticking points. And if we're saying the sticking points now are the metrics, I'd love if we could spend a bit more time, at least as a board, on what we believe are those things that we feel strongly about, at least to add to the dialogue. I worry deeply that time is not in our favor. We are past, it passes every day. And I worry, as we've talked about in this last piece, about diminishing outcomes for our students. And so, as I've said, my goal is to stay as the accountability partner in these discussions. So what I'd like to do is shift and we talked a little bit about metrics. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. How do we trigger, what do we need, what needs to be true in the environment in order to move back in building, at least in some larger next set of folks. So we've talked a bit about local metric versus county metrics. And I guess what I would like to talk a little bit about and get your thoughts on is, can both be true, right? Is there an opportunity for us to look at answering the questions of what does virus spread look like within the ISD community, as well as what does transmission rate look like, and come to some and statement there, since both are important, as well as for me, there's probably an ancillary question of, and so if kids come back, how do they leave? But I'd love to stay on the first two. So for me, I guess I would love to know and talk through that and statement. Is that something that's feasible? What would we consider reasonable statement of looking at both transmission rate within district as well as within the county?
Harlan.
Okay, well, was going to be a topic that I want to talk about. So, that's fine, Sydney. So I think that we need to anchor our work in the decision tree. That's been the guidance that the state has provided. That's a combination of work from DOH and OSPI and the governor's office. And, I think the decision tree is pretty clear. If they refer to community, they don't say county. And I think that's a really important distinction, because they could have said whatever they wanted, and they were very intentional about this. And this is where the vagueness hurts us a lot of times, it seems like. But I think that having the data be based on our community would be the 110 square miles of the Issaquah School District for test positivity, for case counts. I think that I've heard a lot from our educators, mostly from our union leaders, that they really believe that having a county metric is important. I think the case positivity rate of 5% or less, which is also in the decision tree, would be a reasonable balance, because again, this anchors the work in the decision tree that the state has provided. It's not us creating something different. I've heard a lot from people in the community through these comments today about transparency. And just to be clear, the board has been talking about creating these thresholds for when we return since summertime. And we were emphatic with the district leaders about the window of opportunity was closing, and it was a very short window in the fall. And that indeed is what happened. And so just to be clear that we've now been talking about this conversation for over 6 months. I think that it's important that what we do is grounded in both the data and the science. Examples of the data would be our local data is reflective of before and after school care and our current students that are in, such that we're caring for 500 students in buildings, and we haven't seen student to student or student to staff transmission. I think that's a really important thing to note. And that's consistent with regional data in King County, where there's been over 2,000 daycares in place since March of 2020. And they continue to not see any sort of sustained clustering transmission. Consistent with our statewide data, where we have hundreds of elementary schools open across our state. Even in our region, we have elementary schools open. And I'm not just talking about private schools, public schools. 90 school districts in our state have schools that are open and serving students. And given the tone and tenor of even our conversation, that if there was widespread across our elementary schools, students and teachers, it would be all over the news. Consistent with national data. So, I heard teachers refer to you need to look at other states, and believe me, I've looked at lots of other states. And it's been sad to see that Washington State, we could have been a leader in creating these dashboards and these metrics, but I think politics got in our way here. But there are some great things, and because states have done this, there's some great research out there across from Missouri to North Carolina to Wisconsin, you name it, schools that are open, of which there are 56 million students being served in schools right now. we just aren't seeing young children contribute to sustained community transmission. Which lastly brings me to, it's consistent with international data. So everything we see from local all the way to global is consistent with what we are asking our district to do. And then it's also grounded in science. And the science now, 9 months in, is very clear that age less than 10 is just in a different risk category. And then that there's decreased transmission risk from children to adults outside of their household. Those things are not conjectures. Those things are statements of fact grounded in science. So those would be the conversations about metrics that I would like us to continue to have, because I think that's ultimately going to be what will allow our community to know. And I think it's incumbent on us to get to those soon, so we know where they are. And I agree with what Director Weaver said, is like, we're not asking for that or believe that this should be moving into schools now. Don't hold me to this, and I wish these weren't recorded, but I don't believe we'll be at a place where we should be moving into the school buildings again until there's probably a February in the calendar. I hope that I'm wrong. I truly hope that I'm wrong. But so just to allay the fears of any staff member or parent that may be hearing like, we just want to get them into schools and that's all we care about, we'll do it tomorrow if we need to. That's just frankly not the case, nor has it ever been the case. And unfortunately, there have been IEA leaders that have been wanting to spread misinformation about myself, as well as others, from the beginning, from before school even started. And I am really done being disparaged in that way. And I just want to be very clear about that our intent is never to do anything that is not grounded in data, science, and what the thresholds and the framework that the state has provided.
Well, I mean, certainly there's never been more commentary I've heard about my own intentions than the last several months, which is really odd, if I'm honest. I think for me, what I think is important about what we just went through, Harlan, and I want to keep the conversation going, is it almost feels like folks have gotten obsessed with what the numbers say versus what questions are the numbers meant to answer. And I think we have to be really clear about what questions do we need to answer. We need to understand what is the level of infection within our community, what's the amount of spread that's happening, and how do we think about the ins and outs versus any individual number. And it seems, to your point about the decision tree, is, or at least in some of the Cook County dashboard information, is that we have the information available. I guess from my perspective, it appears that by centering on one of those numbers, it makes it a on or off conversation, a for or against sort of conversation, versus saying, what are the collection of these data points that we need to look at in order to make good decisions about return, and heaven forbid, good decisions if we would need to make, change that later. But Anne, I think you were going to say something.
Well, I was just saying, it seems like where we're headed is multiple metrics, both local and King County. We've talked about the local case rate, because that talks about how many cases are coming from our local 110 square mile community and the children that are in the buildings. So that's the one metric, the case rate for our local. And then, drawing in that King County and the positivity rate across the county. So, I mean, I guess now this kind of goes back to the bargaining team on where we are with the metrics that are being discussed. Because those two metrics are where this conversation keeps bringing us back to.
And to say just one more thing about the metrics, we have the governor, I think it was the governor, maybe it was the health department, that decided this is the low range, this is the medium range, this is the high range. We're pretty conservative in this state with those numbers. And those are, it's sort of emotional to say, well, we're in a medium range or we're in a high range. Another state might say that a completely different number defines your moderate range or your low range or your high range. So that's something else that we need to consider when we talk about this, because I don't know, somehow I see on Facebook that, oh, the board just wants to ignore the data, or they want their own interpretation of the data. And it's not that at all, but we do want to acknowledge that the way this state has chosen to look at the data is different than the way other states have chosen. The data is still the same. The decisions are the same, and we're simply, or the decisions are different. And we're just acknowledging that, and we're trying to work through that. But as Harlan said, we're always looking at the data. We're always looking at the science. We're grounded on that decision tree. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Marnie, if I could, I'd like to add an observation too. And it's one, I'm somewhat encouraged, and somebody might think that I'm crazy by that, but if you listen to the input that we've heard now over the last several weeks, there's a lot of commonality on both sides of this issue. What I heard was everybody, there's a recognition of the value of in-person teaching and learning. I've heard that from teachers, and I've heard that from parents, that that people are appreciative that we have done a lot of good work on the safety protocols. And again, we've stated that quite a few times. And I believe our track record with students in building bears that out. I also heard a common theme around a desire for transparency, and then this discussion about a metric. And I think establishing a metric is a great transparency, because it would give all of us, teachers, students, parents, staff, everybody, something that we could watch. And so I'm encouraged by that. And I think the challenge is, just figuring out where those sets of numbers live. What are the appropriate sets of numbers? But I'm encouraged that we can get there. And I am so grateful to everybody's patience. And I know it's running thin. But I do see progress has been made, and that we are moving towards a place where we're now having a discussion on a common, where we can hopefully get to a common set of numbers that we can watch. And I think the discussion that you all just had was important, related to local numbers and county numbers. And I just want to point out, Director Mullins, I think you referred to Cook County at one point. I think you meant to say King County, but I know where you're from.
Sorry.
I wasn't going to say anything, but yeah, I'm like, oh, somebody's from Chicago.
Yeah. I just found out we had WGN on our TV here, and I got all re-Chicagoed this week. So King County.
Dr. Gallinger.
I want to say something, because I think that's come up, frustration from some of our educators in the district, is, why are you still talking about this when we really should be talking about serving kids? And I want to be very clear that that is our focus, is serving kids. But why we're still talking about it is because the discussion's not over. Like, we would love nothing more than for it to be over. But the problem is our community and our teachers deserve to know what is the threshold by which we will move back into learning, so it can be posted, it can be publicized, and we can all watch it. So we will continue to have these conversations until it is, because that's what we were elected to do, is to do what we believe is in the best interest of the kids. And we all believe that in-person learning is better, no matter where you sit on this. We all agree to that in-person learning is better. And we want to do what we believe is best for that. So in a nod to transparency, we want to get that set and established so we can move on, which brings me to my next topic, unless we're going to...
But I'm not doing... I haven't said anything, so I get to speak.
Sorry.
So about this, but what I heard, so I've heard everything that you all have said, but what I haven't heard anyone really speak to is, we just got a bunch of people, and there were way more hands than I had time to call on, saying right now they want their kids back in school. So your metric on the decision tree is anything greater than 75 cases per 100,000 for a 14-day period as a daily number still allows for us to have some in-person learning for some specific groups. And what we're talking about here is for K1 to, kindergarten first, second, third. And that's all we're even talking about here. So we're not even talking about fourth or fifth graders. We're not talking about middle school, high school. And so if I look at the decision tree today, the test positivity is greater than 5%. So we're not meeting that. But the number of cases doesn't have a lid on it. So if the district is going to the union with any type of lid on the number of cases, it's a compromise. And I don't think that we've heard that. That's a compromise. That would be the district or the board saying, you know what? Okay, we will give you this. Here's a cap. So any type of cap is a compromise, whether we are capping a number at the more local level. What we consider our community is the people that elected us to serve them. To me, that's my community. If I realize I have my community that my staff lives in is greater than that, so having a compromise of those two numbers, I do agree with that. But literally any cap is a compromise from what the decision tree said. And I think we've talked about following the decision tree. And this really has been, what are those metrics are really important for us to understand. And it's something that Superintendent Thiele and I had that conversation back on March 11th. Why are we considering closing schools? What are we basing that data on? And what it ended up being based on was the governor came in. But the discussion, we weren't looking at data points, we were looking at number of emails. To be completely honest, that was our data point to start to say, why did we close schools earlier than the governor said to? Had nothing to do with science and had everything to do with how many emails we got from parents and from staff members. And that can't be the reason to open. And we knew at the time, I'm like, we'll go ahead and we'll close, because we didn't have data at the time. We didn't even know what this thing was. We didn't know what our good risk levels. But back then in March, Superintendent Thiele and I were talking about what is our decision to reopen? Because then we thought we were only going to be closed for 5 weeks. We're like, really? Are we just going to reopen because the governor says so? Or are we going to reopen based on some other metrics? And so, so to Dr. Gallinger's point, this conversation has been happening even more than 6 months. We've been talking about it since day one. What is it going to look like to come back to school, and what are we going to consider those metrics by which we're going to reopen and need to close in the future? So I do want to say, I do hear and I feel for those parents that are like, please reopen schools now. There are cities, there are states that have higher case numbers than us that kids are in school. There are kids throughout our state, which their community may be different. So their community numbers may be different. And what defines a community? I'm not elected to serve King County. I'm elected to serve the Issaquah School District. So to me, that's the community that elected me. So that I just wanted to get those points on that. I want to say, I hear those parents that spoke today saying, please get my kids in school now. Regardless of what these numbers say, learning is essential. And much of the other thing I heard really talking about was, it's not about what our teachers are teaching, because I do think they are working hard. They are trying to make this work. They may be even taking more time than normal because they have to formulate lessons that last year maybe they didn't formulate it in that way. So they're doing a lot more lesson planning. I hear all that. And I trust that that's really happening for so many of our teachers, that they're spending time trying to teach well. And it's why for the past 3 years, I've called it, rather than being a teacher, you're a facilitator of learning. And how that happens may end up looking different, because it's not about the results of your pedagogy and how well you executed. It's whether or not students are learning in the end. And I think we know that that is better to do in person. I appreciate the elementary teacher that talked about, if that's going to happen, how I teach at a 6-foot distance of my student, we need to have some thought around. And so I hope maybe at the next general board meeting, we can talk about what is teaching and learning doing to prepare teachers to actually teach in person, because I know they've spent the past 4 months trying to figure out, how do you teach online? So, so that might be something Rich is probably not happy that I'm sitting here going, yeah, so now how are you going to reteach teachers how to teach in person at 6 feet distance? Okay, so that's my points. Dr. Gallinger.
I agree with you, President Moraldo. If we're going to follow and be grounded to the decision tree, there is no ceiling there. So I don't see where that would come from, because that's not grounded in anything. At most, you could see the CDC talks about highest risk is greater than 200. But short of that, like, there's no number out there. I think it, you know, I think that we either follow a decision tree or we don't. I don't get to have those. I'm not in those rooms and conversations, so but that's definitely just my personal opinion. I do have another topic once we're done with metrics.
Okay, is there any more on the topic around the metrics?
Well, maybe. I guess maybe the question is, it seems we've all rallied around that it's an and statement on, is that where we've settled? Is that we think it's an and statement between a local, 110-mile local is a big local, case rate and a positivity rate? Is that what we think is logical?
Well, that's certainly what the board is.
That's what I'm thinking with the five of us.
Moment, what can we know from the bargaining?
Don't everybody jump in at once.
Yeah. I think the quick answer, Sydney, to your question is yes, we accept that as an and statement, a local and a county-wide measure, right. Two different measures for all the reasons that have just been discussed here. Did I get that right, team?
Yes, and Superintendent, before I pass over to Executive Director Fowler, there was also testimony about kind of a whipsaw of remote and brick and mortar remote, etc. You know, quite frankly, we've also discussed a measure that would shut down the system as an example, right? So there is a third and, I believe that, you know, and here is what would close the district, right? And that is just as much to reopen as it is when the pandemic, or if the pandemic were to be at such a rate, or we were unable to keep our employees or our students safe, which I don't think is likely given our PPE and our systems in place, but there is a third and in there as well. So I thought I'd remind the board of that, because that was expressed in community input as well. So Executive Director Fowler, I'll pass it over to you on that lovely note.
You're always stealing my thunder, Cooper.
Oh, sorry. We've been working together too long.
Yeah, I know. No, I just was going to share that, you know, multiple measures of a combination of local and county is definitely an IEA interest. I mean, an ISD interest that has been shared with IEA. And then I was just going to add, I think there is a joint interest between IEA and ISD to have a conversation around what would trigger a once in person, a return to fully remote. So those are all things that have been both presented and discussed at the bargaining table, knowing that the board does have a desire to use both local, you know, or community, if you will, measures, and also looking at county, because county, you know, I know we maintain that county is not necessarily synonymous with community.
And
right, to be clear, like local would be just the city of Issaquah. Like we're 110 square miles, so we're saying community because we have a big footprint.
Fair, yeah. So maybe that needs to be the nuances. We're maybe using the word local when we should be using the word community.
That'd be my recommendation, because that's what the decision tree says, and that's about anchoring it to what the decision tree says. And I think that's why they want community to be defined by how we define it. And I think we're sitting here defining what community means to us. Sorry, Jake Cooper. What were you going to say? Oh,
no worry, Dr. Gonsher. I did want the community to know if it feels like the district is talking tentatively or cryptically, it's only because we're trying to also honor the negotiations between the parties, but also provide you transparent information. I don't want you to think we're dancing around an issue, and I just would rather address that head on, is that Collective bargaining has certain rules in the state of Washington and rules of engagement in particular. And so we are trying to provide the community and staff insight and update on the process generally without providing you any specific details or proposals. So it feels kind of odd, like we're sidestepping and trying to talk in riddle, but I do want you to know that similar to if you were in private negotiations, buying a home or something, you might talk about the home and its number of bedrooms, but when you're really down to that last list price, you probably aren't going to, talk about it and open until you get a deal. And so that's kind of, where the district and our union partners are, is that, we're very close. We've settled on a lot of issues, but we're at that last bit of negotiations. And so we're trying to provide you enough insight and update, but also trying to honor the process. And I would be remiss if I couldn't mention that the community, and I know the board is well aware of that, and central admin staff, but maybe not a rank and file teacher or community members that don't know, aren't steeped in Washington state collective bargaining law, which is very few people are. So I just wanted to take that issue head on and say that to our community that we serve. So
thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah.
Well
and
said.
I would say that I my hope is that this continues until you're done, because I don't want it to get to be another missed opportunity, which was what this fall was. Like this summer, there was a lot of pleas from several of us on the board, and the reason why it was for that missed opportunity that we knew that was going to come in the fall and go by. And so we want this to come to fruition so that when the next opportunity arises, and to be clear, what I heard Director Weaver and more talk about is we're talking an average over certain time periods. It isn't like, oh, when we hit this threshold, we're in. That's not at all what's being said. But this is all done ahead of time, so we know. And that's fair to give the community that knowledge, but to not stop and wait till we get to whatever point we may be before we can have those conversations, because then it'll be too late again.
Right. Well, and I think Director Gallinger that the ISD team is absolutely committed to doing that. And IEA has shared at the bargaining table that they are as well. So I have to have faith in that both sides, if you will, are committed to coming to an agreement.
And I'll just add to that. I agree. We have to continue until we get to the point of the agreement over the metric. We're not going to come out and say we're not opening schools till X date, because it's not about a date. It's about finding the metric that allows us to open schools. And no one is saying it's tomorrow, but we need to come to an agreement on what that metric is. So when we reach it, we implement the plan that you have put into place and all the safety protocols and mitigation to keep staff and students as safe as possible. We're ready to go with that. So we're on this topic of reaching this agreement continuously, and we hope we get this done soon.
And it's a reminder to the community that we were in moderate and we had all of the health and safety framework in place that Assistant Superintendent Bongard and her team had done meticulously for all of our elementary schools. Just a reminder, we were in moderate. We wanted to go back in, and again, we were stonewalled. Just to be clear, as a reminder, because that may seem long ago, and that's why the conversations pivoted from date to metrics. Because just as a reminder, everyone, we were all within what they're now saying is, well, be in the moderate metrics. So,
yeah, and just before I call on you, Superintendent Thiele, I think that we also have to understand that once this bargain is done, and these metrics are established, we go immediately to the next set, because pretty much everything else will be the same. The health and safety is all going to be the same, right? That's pretty much established, and it's established in the King County Toolkit from Public Health. And the next one will be, what is the next set of metrics then for our next group of kids? What is it for our middle schools? What is it for our high schools? And I think it's continuing. What does it look like to bring students back at each of those levels? And so that's why there is a level of urgency that we'd like to get this piece done, because we still have more work to do. This is just phase 2 out of 5, right? Our first phase was getting our special ed kids back into the classrooms, and and so what's the next step? So that's kind of the input there. Superintendent Thiele.
Well, President Moraldo, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. The importance of getting this phase of bargaining done, our K-3 hybrid, in-person, remote, because we do have a lot more to discuss. I mean, we hear a lot from secondary families. We know we've got to be able to provide some higher level of service for those families as well. And just being, as honest and forthright as we can be, that's likely not going to look like just bringing kids back to class like we're talking about with K-3 students. So we've got a lot of work to do there about how we can create, again, pods or whatever it requires for us to be able to serve some of those students. We have to have important conversations, and this should be one that is a ray of sunshine and hope on us about the vaccine, because we are hearing increasingly we have a vaccine that is coming, and we're going to need to be prepared for how that's going to impact what's going to happen in our school district and how we're going to go forward. So that should be a light for us all to point towards. So if we can continue this work, and let's remember too why we're talking about K-3. We are determining that those students are some of the furthest away from educational justice. Now, we know we have secondary students and ELL students and McKinney-Vento students that are far away as well. We want to get in there too. But, we take this on one at a time. And again, I have to agree with Dr. Gallinger. When I look backwards and I see where we were in early October, I see a very a missed opportunity there, and I'm very sorry that happened. In retrospect, I wish that we had staged this differently, that we had guided through this process differently, because I believe we would have gotten those youngest learners in. And based on our experience with our preschools, our students receiving special services, I believe they would have stayed in, because I think our mitigation efforts have really done an amazing job. So we've got a lot of work to do. We need to get this important work done. It's the next step in this phase. And I hate to say this to my team, but as soon as we're done, guess what we get to do? Get up and go in the next morning and work on the next phase of it. So, and I really do. And again, I appreciate, I recognize it takes two parties here. So it's not just my team that has to get up and do that. It's the other teams as well. And I know they're all, they're probably sick and tired of bargaining and want to just get back to their teaching and doing their regular jobs without this disruption. But it's important work that we have to keep going on.
Dr. Gallinger.
Speaking of that, pretty my day job hat, I've been tasked with preparing for how we're going to do the logistics and implementation of the vaccination for all of our hospital-based staff. And we've been told to prepare for that for mid-December. And the vaccine for Pfizer is 21 days apart. So I guess I would challenge our superintendent and team to think about doing a parallel pathway conversation with our bargaining units on what the reopening is going to look like and when, as far as when the vaccination becomes available for our, because I think that that's an important thing for us to start working on. And I think that will probably happen sooner than you could bargain how you're going to open our secondary schools to even groups of 5. That's just my opinion. I might be totally wrong on that, but I do believe that there is something that should be said for doing a parallel pathway where we are looking at secondary students and going from what we say the highest risk and working our way backwards. So focusing on a vaccination program that would be starting with our high school students and our high school teachers because we know those are the highest risk transmission sites. And we know that regardless of the vaccination, that K3 is our lowest risk. So to do a process that would be secondary, working our way down to elementary, because if we have to choose, if it becomes where, oh, you have X number of vaccines available, this would be the time for us to establish who are those high risk categories, which to me, what jumps in my mind is our high school students and our high school teachers before we work our way down. I don't think there's any point for us to vaccinate an elementary teacher who's not going to be in the building over a high school teacher who could get the kids in the building. I think the only way we can get our high schools open is with vaccination. So I do believe it's going to be ready faster than had anticipated. I'm thinking like mid to late first quarter of 2021. So I really hope that the conversation and the bargaining can really be about, so how are we going to implement this vaccination process? Because there will be lots of details to talk about. And then from the point that it's widely available, there should be some probably time-based threshold by which people have the opportunity to get it and then schools reopen, because otherwise it could needlessly linger. And I think if teachers have been placed in the second wave of vaccination process as essential workers, then we need to honor that where they are in their place in line, and then consequently be able to pivot and to move our schools to open to serve as many of our kids as possible.
Great. Any other comments or questions from the board? I just had one other that I think that Superintendent Thiele, I had shared with you one-on-one during our agenda planning, but that the Meade School District was an example that I showed that shared what rates were happening in our school, because I think that as we open our schools, that's an important data point is for people to see, because we're hearing rumors even now. Well, the district isn't telling us if there's any COVID cases when you have teachers and students in there right now and what's happening. So I think that having something similar to what Meade School District has that says, here's all our buildings, here's what, for us, we may have so few students in that we'd have to do it as a district number, but to be able to say, how many cases are there in our schools over the past 2 weeks or whatever that might be. It might be a cumulative number. And then really looking at those transmissions of, was this brought in? Did that person, was that person exposed in school or out of school? So I know that we've had staff members that have been exposed, but they've been exposed outside the school building. If they're exposed, which is different than being exposed inside. And I think that's what the data shows, is that exposure inside school buildings still happens. So I think there might be some people, I think, kids can still give you COVID, but it's not at any higher rate than in the general public. So I think that's an important metric, and we need to communicate that we understand that by having a good way of communicating that to the public.
I've shared the Meade example, the Monroe and Kennewick examples. So that is a work in progress for us, Director Moraldo, just so that, because I like that too. A lot of them are basic spreadsheets where you can just look at and see what school, what was the cause, how many. So that is something we're working on as well. And I know Leisha is in the call, and we had that conversation. We have a meeting tomorrow to discuss that and a number of other communication topics.
And I think, Director Moraldo, if I may, one reason we don't have similar dashboards to Meade, is I've seen those around, is that we have such a small number of students in that, particularly, and they're mostly special education students. We did not want to be personally identifiable in those cases. But we have actively reported out, when there's a positive staff case, or we need to close a building, as you've seen us close buildings a few times since the pandemic has started. So yeah, dashboards are great and something we will need. And I think one thing that's holding us back, as you're right, we might need a district-wide number to start with instead of a building by building, because we don't want to be having anything personally identifiable, but 100% agree. So that's one reason I wanted the community to know, and staff, why we don't have those kind of ticking dashboards, is because we have such a small number of students. We did not want to identify them directly. So it's a weird nexus of health privacy, and the need for the public to know. So it's something we're constantly balancing.
Right. Dr. Gallinger.
Jake, have you ran that by King County? Because from Public Health South King County, I mean, public health trumps all of those things. So I would be curious if they've been the one to tell you that you can't do that. Because most of these schools in Eastern Washington that are open, it's like K1. So it's still small numbers, just for context. So I would just verify, because my understanding is public health, and when it's done in the interest of public health, that the HIPAA, FERPA things are not disregarded, but I think may take second fiddle.
And I can push on our conservative legal counsel's opinion. We have different counsel's opinion. And so I'll circle back with counsel, with superintendent.
There's enough of them out there doing it. I think we would be fine. We want to be careful. We don't want to try to be identifying people, but I've looked at a few of those now, and I think it's doable. I really do.
I think it speaks to the transparency part. One, it shows that we're transparent, and the two, that we're prepared. And I think part of the preparation is like, oh, look, you have this. Not only are you doing all the risk mitigation strategies, but you're also doing the contact tracing and isolation, quarantine strategies too. And I think that will inspire, hopefully, confidence in both our staff and our community, if we can show those things.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so I know we might have a lot of people that were here for, as far as our public, that might not be interested in the next item. So I did want to say that if you missed any of this conversation, you can always go back onto our YouTube channel. I'll say smash that like button, as the kids say. You can see that there. I did want to also comment that there was one piece of feedback that we received about how the board does not feel safe for our board meetings. Unfortunately, I can't point you to the video that we did actually have our lawyer come in and talk about that. That was the October 8th meeting. However, something happened with that recording, and so it didn't get recorded. And so I don't have something to point you back to. But we did have an entire discussion about how the board members do not want to be personally prosecuted by the prosecuting attorney for the county or from the state for not holding an open public meeting or doing that in public, where we would be in violation of the governor's orders. So the governor has still mandated that we meet remotely, but it allows so many of you to be here. And we'll probably continue doing things like recording our meetings and posting that on our YouTube and having it stream live. Will probably be something we do in the future. So with that, I will move to our next topic, and I'm only an hour behind. Capital projects.
So tonight, our CFO, Mr. Cooper, is going to stand in for Director Mullins of our capital projects and provide us with an update on our capital projects. And you can see lots of stuff going on. So Jake, I'll go ahead and just have you walk us through it.
Superintendent, just to confirm, you can see my screen share?
Yes, looks good.
So yeah, Director Tom Mullins, since he valiantly was in last board meeting and didn't quite get to his, I told him that I could clean up and take the special board meeting for him since I was off last week. So I may not be as technical savvy in construction as him, but not my first capital projects update. And I'll let some of the pictures do the talking. So elementary school number 16, as you can see, steel erection is fully underway and has been. So there's 1, 2, 3 decks on there, and then the top mechanical deck. So you can see that those are well underway, which, the goal, of course, is once steel's in and foundation steel in, to get dried in as quickly as possible to get out of the wet. So we're making good progress there, still on time for opening in September. Here's some other views of E16 here. We're gonna water line. Superintendent and myself and Mr. Mullins went on a site visit a couple weeks ago, Ron, I think it was now. And so the site is very busy with earthwork. And of course, this is an installation of a water line loop. And it's amazing how much underground work you do when you're doing a greenfield site like a school, not just for utilities, but relocation of water lines. And, you know, it's quite a massive undertaking, even when you have established infrastructure around you. So, and then of course, we talked about that dried, and you can see on this, that's a very common, so Cornerstone General Contractors is building both middle school 6 and elementary 16 at this point in time. So they're building them both. So we have the same general, different project superintendents. And you can see very common with the district is the steel beam construction, and then almost looks like old school corrugated iron sheets like you'd see. They're basically steel plates which we pour concrete on top of, and that's what they do in a repeated fashion. And Superintendent and I have seen that construction come together very quickly over the years. Though the most common complaint with that type of construction is lack of cell phone coverage. That is because it also is very sturdy and solid, and is repetitive, which I want to point out to the community. That repetitive type of construction you can do over and over again saves the taxpayer a significant amount of money.
Oh, you're muted now, Jake. I don't know what happened.
Oh, that Stephen Collins got happy with the mute button, didn't he?
Oh.
Sorry, Stephen, just kidding. So are there any questions on elementary 16? Thank you. Middle school number 6, as we've talked about before, one of the most technically challenging sites we've ever had to build upon. As we went down the road in the 2016 bond, and we knew that the property acquisition was going to be difficult, and what was left to build our schools on were some of the most difficult sites in the entire 110 square miles. So when you purchase a roughly 9-acre site at the bottom of one of the largest master plan development in the city of Issaquah, you can run into some difficulties, believe it or not. Now we had gone through and had great soils results to start with, but as you know, and you've heard from Director Tom Mullins before, is that we have been battling some subpar soil conditions on the site, but we've continued to move forward. So as you can see, same as elementary 16, kind of the same, not the same pace. This is I believe in all, we're done with, we have 5 stories in this building, Superintendent, if I'm correct. Depends on how you count it or not, if you count the parking or the mechanical. Very similar to what you would see in downtown Seattle in a high rise. You've got cranes on site, very compact footprint. In fact, the staging and layout area is so compact that next week we're going to have structural steel here on the admin site waiting to be moved over to the middle school 6. So that just tells you the site conditions. Last word from the project superintendent, and Cornerstone has delivered us on-time projects time after time. So if any general contractor can get this thing open in September, it'll be them. So they still tell me on time. Of course, contractors are never 100% solid in the guarantee until it gets right down close. Just imagine your kitchen remodel, but about 100 million times more. Literally 100 million times more. So as you can see, compact site, but lots of progress on the steel. Were meant to be done with steel here shortly. I haven't had an update from Mr. Mullins yet, but I think the steel erection should be very close to being finished. And so the sports fields and layouts, and you're familiar, I believe, now with the layout of the site, building on the facing the main drive of Talus as you go up, and then the sports fields kind of to the south on SR 900. And so that's the layout. And then a lot of topo or topography on the site, which you can see is, made it pretty condensed. But all in all, the city has been very good to work with on this project, a series of permits, and very complicated engineering. So back to the retaining walls again. This upper tier, the large retaining wall at the southeast end of the sports field. So that's, as I talked about, as you are going south on SR 900, that would be the wall to hold your fields in place, which is pretty important. And then the excavation related shoring to the parking garage. So as you enter the site, imagine you're driving up Tallis Drive and you take a left-hand turn into the school. If you're heading up the hill in Tallis, you would then, if you're an employee, you would go underneath into the parking garage. And so there'll be an entrance both for employees to go underneath the parking garage, and certain community members want to see how we regulate the security. And then, or you would head straight, basically up the hill into the site, and go to the main pickup and drop off. So first time we've had underground parking, as you know. Recent code change from the city of Issaquah that was undertaken after the bond was approved by our citizenship. So, but a first for us all together.
Before you go on, you talked about the subpar soil.
Yes.
So what is the mitigation for the subpar soil?
As far as I understand, mitigation for the soil it's really how we are handling where the water drains on site. So it's at the bottom of the hill. And so we have to do a significant amount of excavation to make sure the water drains appropriately. And then secondarily, when we're building these large retaining walls, they shoot what's called soil nails in. And a soil nail basically is, imagine like those little pieces of rod when you hang a picture frame or you put something through a piece of sheetrock and then it will expand. And so you can't pull it back out. So what happens is we shoot these long steel rods into the sides of the wall to build this retaining wall. And what we've had to do, Director Moore, is actually put cement in and inject it into the soil. So you're basically making kind of a half concrete, if anything. So that's what you use to stabilize the soil. And so we inject that grout, as what it's called, right into the soil to make sure it's stable. So, right, Superintendent, I think that's the rundown, the technical rundown we got.
So to answer your question directly, and it is mitigated through excavation, through the redirection, rechanneling of water, and the creation of retaining walls in the manner that Jake just described. So it's kind of a multi-step process.
Yep.
And thank you. I had confidence they were handling this, but I just think it was good to have it be said out loud that it's not just their subpar soil and we move on with our plan the way it was, but we take that into consideration and we fix it so that our building and everybody is safe in it.
That's right. And of course the city would require that of us and we would do it anyway. We're all working in conjunction. And it is, as Jake said, it is a very challenging site in a lot of ways. But I just have to say, it is going to be an amazing school to serve our community. And what a great resource addition to our community as well. So they're doing a great job with it. They're just having to squeeze it in. We're having to learn how to build schools in a new way in King County with our greater population density and with the Growth Management Act.
Yep,
and again, I think
I drove by it the other day and it is just amazing to see it at this stage. Because of course I'd seen it before, when it was, hadn't started at all. And then I hadn't driven by in a really long time. And I went by just a week or so ago and it's phenomenal. So excellent work.
And our Timber Ridge neighbors have been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a bond with the general contractor, and we update the community consistently, and so we couldn't ask for better neighbors and partnership from that community. So
and Jake, I would say that's true of the entire Tallis community. We've had really good meetings with the Tallis HOA. Not to say they don't have concerns that they raise periodically, for sure. But I think we've been able to work very collaboratively with the community there to bring this resource in.
Yeah, I would agree, Superintendent. High school 4 and elementary 17. Of course, you've seen this rendering many, many, many times. As the district is in to the city of Issaquah for the site and development permit application as of the end of September. And the public comment period, of course, just recently ended last week. I'll have to circle back with my team to see what public comments are provided to inform our construction as it moves forward. And then, of course, we continue to work with the city staff on various code interpretations. You've all heard about the FAR, or the floor area ratio, as we've talked about. As of course, this is the first batch of schools built on the city of Issaquah's new school code. So we have some, collaborative work to go together on some code interpretation. So we're working forward on that piece. And then, of course, it is public record that the district and the city prevailed in our growth management hearing board's appeal. And so that hurdle has been cleared by the district, which is important. And we'll be moving forward and trying to get in the dirt as soon as we can on that site.
I would add, Jake, on this conversation, somewhat ironically, at least to me, this site is not nearly as challenging to develop as the base of Tallahassee. Having said that, we have encountered, as the board knows all too well, since you took your first eminent domain action on this piece of property in July of 2016, just lots of hurdles. And we've been consistent and persistent in managing through these hurdles. And but I am concerned. I'm concerned about how much time it takes to go through the courts and do all of these mitigation processes, and because time is money, and those delays do add up. And so I just want to be, again, to be transparent, my concern about this particular project, I think the project itself will be amazing. I think it will, again, be a tremendous resource to the overall community. But I'm just concerned about the amount of time that it's taking. And I would just implore everybody involved in it to please move as judiciously as possible. We need to get this. We need to get a site development permit, and we need to get started on these important infrastructures.
Can I ask, before you go on to the next school, I actually spent a couple of hours listening to the last Sammamish City Council meeting, and I was concerned that there's a certain amount of either misinformation or mistrust with some of the city council members regarding this property. And I'm wondering, are we going to do some kind of outreach or linkage or something with the city of Sammamish around this property? Because I really didn't like some of the things that were being said.
Yeah, that offer has been made, Director Weaver, by our staff, by me personally, to the city manager, to some of the city council. I've spoken directly with a couple members of it. I do understand some concerns. We have had staff at those meetings, just so you know, we're kind of following those conversations as well. It took us a little bit by surprise a few months ago when that came up, but it is what it is. I recognize that that has happened. And so we would welcome an opportunity, and our capital projects team continues to work closely with the building department staff in the city of Sammamish. It's unique in that the only part of this project that really is impacted by the city of Sammamish is the frontage. The site itself is actually in the city of Issaquah. It's a city of Issaquah project. It's not a Sammamish project, but there is a frontage issue there because it's right there as you enter into the city. And so there is, and we want to work closely with the city as well. So yes, I've actually even offered up the board for a linkage, but staff, whatever they need. As you know, we sent a letter when they first brought this, they first discussed this project, and a number of city council members raised concerns about the project. There was, in fact, some misinformation, incorrect information, and so we do have to help correct that. And we have, in that letter, we did try to do that, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, and I couldn't quite identify all the players because, you know, it was one of these weird YouTube Zoom things. But it didn't seem to be so much a problem with city staff as it was with just a couple of council members that really didn't seem to understand what we were doing, or either didn't trust us to do it right. I'm not sure which. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but they, you know, a lot of people listen to their meetings. So I want to make sure that that they have accurate information. And I don't know, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I'd be more than happy to sit down and meet with the city council if that's what it takes.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, I was apparently getting some feedback, so I was fiddling around with my sound settings, and Director Moraldo goes, you know, you're sharing your screen still. So yeah, that's good that it was just the sound detection, Director Moraldo, and nothing embarrassing, more than usual for me. Maple Hills Elementary, if we can talk about that for just a little bit. Building permit's been filed. Oh, it's been received. Sorry, we have the building permit for Maple Hills, which is good news.
Yeah, we're ready. We're
ready to go out to bid. Sorry,
on that one.
We're ready to go to bid on that one, which is good. HVAC replacement and fire sprinkler, so up to code. And then you see a little bit of the cosmetic work that we did over the summertime, which
looks great.
A lot better. And then, of course, not knowing when school will begin, you know, we still have targeted those late spring, early summer start dates for construction. Given that I'm hopeful that we'll have kids back in building, I did not believe it was prudent for us to take license and start tearing apart Maple Hills during the school year. So I want people to know that they're like, why aren't you taking advantage of the pandemic for construction purposes? It is because we believe our students are going to return to brick and mortar. That is why. It's not because we're not utilizing our empty building. We believe that kids are going to come back shortly. So, but all in all, that project is in good shape. Current estimates have it on budget, which is important for us. And then it will be done by, I don't have a completion date on here, but I imagine fall of 21, the HVAC will be done. I should be able to swing that out over the summertime. Any questions on Maple Hills? And then Beaver Lake, talk about a project that would be ripe for the Curb Appeal show that some of us used to watch on HGTV. It is amazing what Beaver Lake looked like with just a bit of re-landscape and paint. Of course, we have some more work to do there throughout the year, but we're well on the way on getting that designed. Of course, HVAC, again, you can see there's always an emphasis on HVAC systems whenever we go in and do these modernization projects. I know they're not sexy or pretty, but as you know, they're one of the most common complaints by staff, students, and community is how their building feels, you know, climate-wise. You know, is it cold? Is it hot? Is the air moving? And as we've seen, particularly during the pandemic, a focus on HVAC. And so we continue to have good systems that circulate air at a high rate, which is important. And Beaver Lake, of course, I believe opened in 96, if I'm right, Superintendent, somewhere in there.
1994, I believe.
94, thank you, Deputy Superintendent Dr. Almy, former principal of Beaver Lake Middle School. Yeah, so it's had a useful life for sure, and it is time to get replaced. And we have done that.
Not replaced, Jake. It's time to get refreshed. We're not replacing Beaver Lake.
No, well, no, the HVAC system is to be replaced, Superintendent.
Yeah.
I'm not replacing everything after 94. That would be a mistake. But all in all, it will have a huge amount of upgrades. And we are looking at, of course, doing one small footprint addition currently, and that's some additional music storage. So we'll see how that comes out as we get closer to costing out the entire project. But moving forward nonetheless, and part of the 2016 bond.
Jake, I do want to dispel any rumors that the former principal at Beaver Lake convinced them to paint the school in Cougar colors. I do not believe that was how that choice was made. I will say, as a Husky, looking at all that, what appears to be crimson and gray, I mean, it looks beautiful. I know the neighbors have commented on how nice it is. I suppose nobody would like us to paint a school purple and gold in their neighborhood. So, but I do want to clarify, I don't think it was Dr. Almy. Now, I'm not so sure about Capital Projects Director Mullins, who also happens to be a Cougar, and how that color slid in there. But
well, it's better than my alma mater of Oregon
though, I
State.
have to say.
If you'd like to have an orange and black building, I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, no, that is true, Superintendent. It has nothing to do with who's in charge of capital projects. And the final Liberty High School Stadium. Now there is one positive to not having fall sports, and that is that we have been able to continue construction on Liberty Stadium improvements, the last portion of their stadium improvements. So if we can squeeze any bit of sunshine around the pandemic, is the fact that we've been able to continue construction on that project. Normally we would be kind of holding back and postponing until fall sports were done, as there's heavy usage of the field. So positive news there, and that project is continuing as planned. And then you can see completion is shortly after the new year, February 2021. We will see if my team can pull that together. I see it on the slide deck, and I'll circle back with them. And don't worry, Director Mullins, we're getting to your chart shortly. It is in the presentation. And those are just the elevation shots of Liberty, and I think those were in a few decks. And okay, Director Moore, this is the last project in the 12 bond set. And I believe the project budget's about $1.5 million-ish, if I looked, or $1.25 last I looked. So yes, that is a lot of money, but that is not a lot of money in terms of public works projects. So we are focusing our efforts, as we did from the bond committee, to modernize that press box up above, which will include, updated AV, our audio visual. And then we, of course, as we're doing this, we would always like to update the ADA access. And I think most of our buildings, of course, have either undergone major renovation or upgrade and are ADA compliant where they are legally required to do so. And then another additional thing is we were going to update and purchase new visitor side stands as well. So we're very mindful of capacity, as we do not want to trigger that any new permitting requirements from the city of Issaquah. But that is the last project in the 2012 bond, and I'll be looking forward to when it is done.
9 years by the time it's done.
Yes, indeed.
Well, something always has to be last.
That is true. That is true. And I would rather have it, in this case, be a press box upgrade than a school.
That is so true.
So, and of course, now a fixture of every slide deck put forward by Capital Projects is our current project schedule. And of course, you can look at that at your leisure. There's a lot of detail in there. And I believe Tom had already sent this presentation directly to the board. But for the community, if you want to see where we're at in any given large project, we don't often put the smaller carpet replacement and things of that nature on here, but our major projects are tracked and the progress updated as needed. So any questions from the CFO pinch hitting for the capital projects director when it comes to new construction? All right.
So Jake, this is probably a broader question, but we had talked, or we hear from people like, okay, we're losing enrollment. We don't have kids in school, and you're building more classrooms.
Correct. Let me pull up what I was going to look at here in just one second. So one thing of importance, Director Moraldo, is that when the superintendent, and that is back before he was superintendent, I believe, was it not? No. Did you do the 16 bond committee with me as a facilitator?
Yeah, no, I did no, I didn't do the 16 bond committee. That was my committee. You did it. But we began that process in 15. And yes, I was superintendent, Jake. 13.
So even with our enrollment at the levels in 2016, we made a case to the community numerically that we need those facilities now. Now, remember, and we've talked about this openly, we have 230 portables, I believe, right now, 220. And I was trying to pull up the historical enrollment that I just updated. There's nothing like a presentation with a huge Excel spreadsheet, but I won't share the screen. I'll talk about it. So when we were planning the bond issue in 15, our enrollment was 18,400 students. Even with the loss of nearly 1,000 students, that's excluding Running Start. So we have another 500 or 600 kids in there, and preschool, mind you. But our enrollment as of 10/1/20, 10/1/2020 was 19,141.37 to be exact. So still above that mark in 2015 by quite a spread. Sorry, I can't do that. About 1,400 students. No, 1,100 students. And excluding Running Start. So even with a decline in enrollment, we still are in need of those facilities, particularly since we have 200 plus portables where kids are housed currently. So our permanent capacity has us hugely underhoused. And of course, we've limped along over the years, being one of the districts in the top 5 in the state in the number of portables at any given time. Puyallup, Bethel, us, and other rapid growing districts often hold that Lake Washington, that illustrious title of having most portable classrooms. So yes, I know I've heard concerns about that. I do believe the pandemic is going to end, and I do believe enrollment will return. But to the board's prior points, it will depend on how we serve the community going forward. I don't think enrollment loss will be permanent over the long term if we can continue to serve the community as we have for the last many decades. So part of the enrollment, I think, continued decline, Director Moraldo, will be on our performance to the community as it should be, because they can find other options. But mathematically, we still need those schools no matter what. We still have Issaquah High and Skyline in the top 10 in size in the whole state. Last I looked, when it comes to number of students on a head count basis. So those two schools are very large. And of course, I talked about the massive reliance on portables that we continue to have. So I know my main concern with the 2016 bond issue, quite frankly, is how tight the budgets are going to be as we get towards the end of our projects. We do have an inflation hedge, but those are often predicated on a certain time horizon for construction. Have you asked me in July of 16, had we not been in the dirt on high school 4 and elementary 17 by now, I would have thought you were crazy. But those are my biggest concerns. So to answer the community, first off, the enrollment volatility for a pandemic, no one's ever been through it. I could be wrong. We could decline further. Some people believe we could decline further. We could bounce back 1,000 kids. It all depends on, I think, what learning model we're going to be in the fall. And then secondarily, time, as of course, you know, as a finance person, the time value of money is important to me, and that's been significantly eroded by inflation. So those are my two takeaways from the construction project, from both an enrollment and capacity and housing, and then of course a pricing.
That second one was going to be my next question. Of it has, especially on high school 4 and elementary 17, I don't think that we thought it was going to take 4 years, and we still don't have permits. And you'll recall December of 2016 is when, was it December when we did the eminent domain, or was it October?
July of 16.
July.
So
we did it immediately. I mean, very quickly after we passed that
That's
bond.
right. That's right. So
it's taken us this long.
I have.
And I think the other thing that has been surprising for a lot of people is how construction and pricing costs have gone up during this pandemic, and we haven't hit kind of the recession. There is a recession, and a lot of people are feeling that, but in the same right, there's kind of, you know, there's the pricing for everything is just still going through the roof. And
Yeah,
is that still the case for construction?
Construction inflation slowed down a bit. I mean, we had some uphill battles with tariffs and cost of raw materials. I mean, steel was up significantly a ton when we were scoping out the and pricing, the initial pricing on the projects. A lot of it has to do, I think, also, for example, we rebuilt Pine Lake Middle School from the ground up on site. On site though, a site we knew, for $75 million approximately all in. That's everything. That's construction, fixtures, furniture, equipment, permits, architecture fees, everything, the whole 9 yards. You know, middle school 6 is going to be closer to $100 million all in when it's done. And most of that is construction inflation. And those projects are only 18 months apart from pricing. And so that tells you that the cost to develop that parcel is significantly higher. Underground parking, not in our original bond, is also part of that. And then construction inflation. So, you know, you see about a 30% increase over an 18-month period, which is pretty dramatic in any market. So that's what we're dealing with. That's why you've seen us downsize scope. We're building elementary 16 and 17 at our old small footprint of 24, not our larger footprint of 28 or 32, because those classrooms are running, you know, about $1.3 million or $1.4 million a piece by the time you spread them out over the project.
With room to add on, correct?
Not at elementary 16. That site is, it would be very difficult giving the buildable lands to have much of an addition there. But we do have 4 portable pads that potentially can convert to square footage, but pretty tight on that site, even though it's what is that site? I think it's 13 acres, but there's only about 7.5 buildable. And so again, when you're down looking, build schools on the last bit of parcels in the 110 square miles, the cost to develop gets pretty significant. So that's on the time horizon. I think we will know more once we get to the permitting stage and final cost stage on what our scope is going to be for those final projects.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Okay.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
And finally, we have our calendar and future agenda topics. And I think we put this on there in case the board wanted to schedule another board meeting between now and our next official one, which is December 9th.
Well, we'll certainly want updates on the bargaining, whether those can be provided to us via email, or we need to schedule an exec session. But I think it's important that we are right on top of with an update after the next 1 or 2 bargaining sessions.
Agreed.
And I think your team will be available through Wednesday, of course. I imagine we'll be potentially eating some turkey on Thursday. But early next week, Director Moore will be available to update you on any mean or mode possible. Correct, Director Fowler?
Yep, absolutely. We have a bargaining session scheduled for Wednesday, I believe 10 to 1. So we will have at least an update after that. So if we want to touch base early next week or at the very latest, maybe midpoint next week.
I'll certainly reach out to you, President Moraldo, if we need to try to get either a full regular session scheduled, an executive session. And I would remind everybody that bargaining updates are one of the reasons that boards can meet in executive session. But I think probably be a good idea to hear how things go on Wednesday, and then I'll circle back to you and we'll kind of figure out what our next move needs to be that way.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Harlan.
Two things. One is I told you the wrong date, Marnie, but the date that's been scheduled for our conversation with the 5th Legislative District folks is Monday, December 7th. And it's between 1 and 2 p.m. So I told you the wrong time or date, I think. And then for our superintendent, hopefully that will work for you. And I think we wanted Elena to join us.
Well, the good news is right now on my calendar, Elena is scheduled for a meeting with me during that time. So we now have our agenda.
Yeah. Perfect. And then because we want it to, I think we're just gonna have 2 board members at that meeting. So I'm assuming it's going to be me and President Moraldo, but I didn't want to presume that. So I'm handing it off to her to make that. And then I have one other thing.
Okay. Yeah, I can make that meeting.
Then the one thing that I forgot to mention in the reopening update is I don't know if Exec Director Hood is gone or not, but something that I think that we should push is, since Washington has 2 million of the antigen tests just sitting around, like maybe this is the time for Kinko to pilot using them to do a basketball season. So I don't think antigen tests are good for anything but athletics, in my personal opinion. I certainly wouldn't open schools with them, but I think athletics would be a good usage of them, and that's what's being used across the country. So since they're sitting there collecting dust, maybe there could be a conversation on Kinko piloting for the state, what it would look like to do boys and girls basketball. And so with that, since it's a 15-minute turnaround time, you could literally test every player before game time. So that was the one last thing I forgot to talk about.
We'll follow up on that one as well. Thank you for that, Harlan.
Great. Well, seeing nothing else on our agenda, thank you all for spending this time and talking with staff and letting us kind of flesh out a lot of what's going on. And thank you for the public and their attention. And with that, I adjourn this meeting.
Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy holiday.
Good night. Happy holidays.
Happy Thanksgiving.